Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
What is going on, everybody? We've got one game left here in Week 14. Probably a lot of people's fantasy lives hang in the balance that it is. We are into the playoffs. It is one and done time. So if you do not win today, you are sitting at home like most of my teams. So that is not the fun part about it. We'll discuss everything that happened yesterday and obviously probably talk a little bit more about the massive game that is going to be going on tonight, especially after what happened in last night's game. Matt, how you doing today on this beautiful Monday?
Pretty good. I've got a few matchups that are going to come up down to tonight. My work league, I'm looking to pull the first round upset. I have a 28-point lead with Mark Andrews left to go. I know you're probably not a fan of hearing that, but against he has Hunt and then the Ravens defense and kicker. So I'm feeling good, but you never know. I mean, Kareem Hunt could have 95 points and kill me.
That is true. Yeah, so I know I talked about it last week. So I made the playoffs in 15 of my leagues, and I will be advancing in 13 for sure. One of them I know for sure I'm knocked out of. There's no way I'm going to make it. I have Chubb going tonight, but he's got to score me 80. I don't see that happening.
All he needs is 800 yards.
That's true. That is true, which I guess is technically possible. But I'm
or
going to
like 400 yards and 10 touchdowns, something like that.
The other one seems possible, but I'm not counting on it. So I'm kind of assuming I'm out of it in that one. But I need 60 from Chubb, Hunt, and Dobbins. So I guess that one is technically possible, but I'm assuming it's not going to happen. So I'm assuming I'm making it forward in 13 of them. I think my biggest one, which is really going to suck, because I was talking, Alfred had posted about it on Twitter, and I commented with it on the league that we created in the program. Our championship for our side of the division is next week, and I won with like a massive score this week of like 230. I was the highest scoring team on our side of the league, which means I'm going to completely shit the bed next week and get bounced, I think. But we're in the AFC together, so we play our AFC championship game next week, and then we play the winner of the other league, which is the NFC, in Week 16. So hoping that I can make it. That's probably my biggest money league going at the moment, at the one I'm most excited about. But it's a good week in that one. We'll see what happens moving forward. All right, so let's kick it off with some of the games that we saw yesterday. The Bears won 36-7 at the Texans. For Houston's side, Watson 16 points, Duke Johnson 7, Kiki Kuti 9, and Chad Hansen 12. We saw a lot of talk today about Romeo Cannell talking about how they need to do a better job of protecting Watson. Now there's talk as well that they'll likely the Texans organization will sit down and talk with Watson on who the next head coach will be as well. So Watson getting a lot of respect there in Houston. Do you think that they can be fixed here for us as in fantasy moving down the stretch?
I mean, for this season, you're probably just playing Watson and that's it. I mean, Cooks came out injured. Johnson on COVID. Don't know if he's going to come back. Don't know if it even matters. Kuti and Hansen are okay, but not incredible. Their team just doesn't look great, and their defense has nothing. I would be more concerned. Like, I don't know that this is any quick fix. They have no picks. And we talked about before trying to get draft capital back. Their only great assets to potentially move are probably Watt, would have been a better asset probably to move it during this season than it would be in the off season, or Watson, which they seem like they're not going to do. Unfortunately, if you're a Texan fan, things can turn around quickly if you get the right head coach. We saw with the Browns, they didn't make incredible personnel changes, but they got a much better head coach, and they were able to play better with the people they have. Some of these suspensions that they've had lately are going to linger into next season. I'd have some concerns. They splashed out a lot of money on a couple of contracts for offensive line, and they don't seem to be getting a great return on investment. It just feels like they're going to waste all of Deshaun Watson's prime with no real running game, no real passing game, no real defense, no real chance.
Yep. Yeah, I don't. I'm with you. I don't see much of a change here. I mean, we got David Johnson went on COVID last week. I would almost imagine they probably just don't even bring him back. At this point, there's no point in bringing him back. By the time
he wasn't that much better than Duke Johnson the week he played.
Yeah, and I mean, Cooks, I'm with you. It's Watson at this point. I don't think you can trust anybody else, unfortunately, on this the Texans offense, which sucks. But at this point, it kind of is what it is. At least Watson is still producing for you, which I think is, in all honesty, kind of magnificent, especially against the Chicago Bears defense, and still to get you 6 points with pretty much everyone around him beat up. Not even getting a guy like who I thought might have a decent game here, and Jordan Akins involved, and still was able to get you at least 16 points. On Chicago's side, we saw Trubisky with 24, David Montgomery 24, Allen Robinson 27, and Jimmy Graham 12 in this one. What do you think the future of Trubisky and Robinson is in this Bears offense? I almost feel like this probably could be the last we see of them. At least we know that of Trubisky, I would say, but possibly the end of Robinson as well.
Honestly, I'm curious because the last stretch that he's played, Trubisky hasn't looked that bad. The Bears have actually worked themselves in a position where they're kind of in that no man's land for picking quarterbacks in the first round. I guess they could wait and take one and develop. Mitch is a free agent. I doubt he's going to command a huge salary. It's going to be like Mariota. Does he go somewhere where he's a backup? And obviously we saw that didn't work out. Marcus Mariota has been no factor in Las Vegas. Even Jameis Winston, no factor really in New Orleans. I don't know that somebody's taking a huge chance on Mitch. I don't think Foles is the answer. Probably a bigger question, too, is Allen Robinson. Are they going to franchise tag him? Because if I'm Allen Robinson, it may not be about the money for me. Seeing as how I'm getting close, your prime is only so long of being your prime. I may be looking to see what offers I can get from teams where I have a chance to contend. I don't know if that is Chicago. They're another one. I think a lot is going to depend, too, what happens with Ryan Pace, the GM, what happens with Matt Nagy, the head coach. There have been a lot of voices clamoring for them to leave. We see flashes of what the offense could be and what these pieces can be. David Montgomery has been on an incredible tear, which begs the question we've all been asking, why haven't you been giving him the ball or letting him get involved or running the ball? It seems like the play calls have improved a little bit as we've gone down, or the execution has improved a little bit. I'm going to be curious to see how they end up. It's not out of the realm of possibility. They finish 8-8, and then what do you do with that?
Yeah, the one thing I'll say on Montgomery, and Nick Whalen posted this, and I didn't realize, and I'm just going to be 100% honest and transparent with everybody here. I did not watch a lot of football Sunday. I was kind of in those I'm sure everybody kind of gets it, where I got knocked out in so many leagues that I think mattered to me. I just kind of needed that breather. So, and maybe it was something to do with the Browns not being on as well, because I will tune into every Browns game regardless, even when they were at their 0-16 year a couple of years ago. You still have that little glimmer of hope that, well, they'll get the one, so I'm going to tune in. But I had Red Zone on, and I was watching the games. But for those of you who follow me on Twitter, so I was charting no gains and loss runs on a bunch of the prospects coming into this draft for the running backs, and so I was paying more attention to that. I didn't watch a lot of football. So I was looking at just going back and watching some of the highlights and going through games, and I don't know if Montgomery had quite the game we thought he did. He had the one run for 80 yards, the very first play of the game, which I did see that part. But then the rest of his runs, he only got 33 yards. So
they only gave him 11 carries total. So
yeah, but still only 33 yards and 10 more carries though. Like that's
I don't think the 80-yard run was his first carry.
It was the first play of Chicago's drive, because I was like I was actually paying close attention to the beginning of the games, and he broke that off and was like, okay, well, David Montgomery's gonna have himself a day today, and then, which I get, you're right, they only did give him, I guess, technically 10 more carries after that,
throwing a whole bunch. Yeah, I think some of those carries actually were when they were just milking the clock down at the end.
But it's just, I think. This year, I think Montgomery is going to help people win championships. We've been talking about how he's been coming on the past couple of weeks. Has a huge game again today. He's got the plus matchup moving forward. I think he's got Vikings and some other really good matchup the next 2 weeks. So he's likely going to be a guy that wins you. I would almost see if I could sell on him in the offseason, because three yards a carry is not great. After that, against especially that Houston Texans defense, where we were talking about, like, that's the matchup right there. Like, he has a great matchup. So all in all, I'm not sold on Montgomery, even though he did end up having the big day. I'm with you on Robinson. I feel like we've been talking about it for years, especially this offseason, like how good he would be if he got a competent quarterback back there. He's only 26 years old, I believe, so he's still young and has plenty of time. I think he's still in his prime for the most part. If he ends up going to another team, I'd be worried. I don't know if Chicago would franchise tag him, just because I think that'd be – I don't know if it'd be that high, maybe $8-9 million. The highest paid wide receivers I know are up there, like Julio and Beckham. They're only getting 13. So it's going to go based on the highest paid top five, right? That's how they do it. They average out the top 5 wide receivers for the franchise tag.
I think so. So, I mean, it would be a significant cost for sure.
Yeah. So I don't know if they'd franchise him. I'd be interested to see what he does, because I'm very big on Robinson. I mean, we've seen how good he is with bad QBs. And it's just, again, he's only 26 years old, which is just insane to say, because it feels like the dude's been in the league for 10 years. But he's only 26 years old. So in my opinion, he's still in his prime. I'm not looking to sell wide receivers till they get to like that 30-32 area. So if you can still get 4 more years out of Robinson, if he goes to a good team, I'm all in on Robinson. But yeah, we all know, I'm pretty sure, at least I would guess, Trubisky's not coming back. They pick up his 5th-year option. I don't see him re-signing him. So it'll be interesting to see what this whole Bears team does. We'll probably talk more about them come Black Monday, which is obviously the Monday after Week 17, which is just coming up in 3 weeks now, where they release a bunch of head coaches, general managers, and everything. We'll see if Chicago's on that list and what happens with them. That being said, moving forward, at least for the rest of this year, you're riding pretty, because Robinson, since Trubisky has been put in at quarterback, has just been phenomenal. So you're wanting to hope that Mitch Trubisky stays in there at quarterback to keep Robinson rolling. Next up, you definitely got this one, Ryan. I did not think the Cowboys were going to be able to beat Cincinnati. They come in and beat them 32-7. Was not even a game. Dalton 15 points, Pollard 12, Zeke 7, and Amari Cooper 15. Do you think we'll see more of Pollard as the season winds down? And if so, what does that mean for Zeke in the fantasy playoffs?
I mean, it certainly seems like they've been trying to get Pollard more involved the last few weeks. I think it means Zeke is a tough play in the fantasy playoffs, as he's been for a lot of the season. I know, even though I told you I thought that the Cowboys would throw some with Andy Dalton, that he'd want to have a good showing, I still thought they would run more. They just don't seem to be doing it. And the fact that Ezekiel Elliott is now in some kind of committee, and a committee where the other guy has some, boom bust potential, and, he caught a touchdown yesterday, which is why his points go above. I think that's very worrisome. He probably drops from what a lot of people drafted as a solid RB1 to, an iffy flex option.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in the one league that I had him that I made the playoffs, I did not start him. But then again, I had Swift, Taylor, and I mean, wasn't a better play, but I had Bernard as well. And I ended up starting Bernard over him. So I'm with you. I mean, chances are, especially if you're talking redraft or maybe even dynasty leagues, you may not have any better options just because a lot of people built their teams around Zeke being an RB1 the past couple of years, and he just hasn't been that. I think what's going to be more interesting, and again, we're going to start obviously getting more toward off-season talk here soon. We're getting toward the end, obviously, of the fantasy football season is what we do with Zeke moving forward, because at this point you can't sell him for much. And I'm hoping that the biggest issue is they just don't have Dak back there, but I don't know how much you trust him going into the 2021 season at this point.
Well, and I wouldn't be selling him now because it'd be selling low, with a guy, whereas you were talking about Montgomery might be a sell high right now.
Yeah.
With looking at, he's had some good production here lately, and we're not sure if that continues. Elliott has not had good production for more than half a season, so his value is probably lower than it's ever been. I'm actually, as we've watched the season play out, thinking that you and Dennis were right at the beginning, that the sell window for Ezekiel Elliott was before this season. It seems like it's just come off. Is it the coaching and the scheme change? I find it hard to believe Dallas is going to move on from McCarthy. Probably the most hopeful news out of Dallas lately has been that Jerry Jones is considering firing himself as GM, which that might be part of what needs to happen. Well,
I agree that it should happen. I don't think it will happen. Yeah,
I do the most hopeful news, not incredibly hopeful news.
You're right. I do think the biggest issue is McCarthy. I mean, I think I was probably out of all of us the most negative on him, the hire there for him going to Dallas. And I just going back and looking more and more at it, you really look at outside of 1 year of Eddie Lacy, who was it else? There was another year of somebody.
Amon Green.
Probably that had like top 12 running back finishes. After that, they just don't do it. And I just don't think he's a good head coach anymore. He was good. I'm not trying to say Mike McCarthy was never a good head coach. He was. I just think he's past his prime at this point. I hate to put it that way, but to watch the little interview he did with the NFL Network people is like, look, kids, I'm cool. I look at analytics, and then we see just the dumb decisions they make, and then they blame it on analytics. Like the punt, I think it was on Thanksgiving night. It was like a 4th and 8 and going for it on a punt and gets completely blown up by Washington. Other just stupid play calls they've made, and they've said, well, that's what the analytics said at the time. Well, it's funny that Baltimore doesn't do dumb shit like that, and they're very analytics-based. We see Cleveland doesn't do dumb shit like that, and they're very analytics-based. Same with San Francisco. I mean, you hear the rumors all the time that the Patriots have been very analytic-based for a very long time. They just don't talk about it. I don't see New England doing dumb shit like that. So I think it's more of a coaching problem than it is anything else. But the sad part about that is you're right. Me and Dennis did say it was time to sell Zeke. And guess who didn't sell Zeke anywhere? It was me, because I still kind of believed in him. And now I think it's going to come back and bite me in the ass.
Well, it's just such a dramatic drop-off. Even like what you said, that he was putting up some good games earlier in the season.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of questions about Dallas in the offseason that have to be solved. We've probably seen this offense not only get exposed because Dak Prescott is demonstrably better than Andy Dalton, no matter what we thought of that signing in the offseason, demonstrably better. Their offensive line was a pinnacle strength. And that has probably a lot to do with Ezekiel Elliott too. When you were behind that other, that original Dallas line, they've had some injuries, retirements, and things like that. It's not fundamentally the same. And I think Prescott's multidimensional in a way that Dalton isn't. So it probably fundamentally changes how defenses approach them too, and certain, and what they're sending in terms of people coming in and just committing to the run. Just you're not really worried about Andy Dalton running away from you for a touchdown.
Yeah. On Dalton's old team here, the Cincinnati Bengals, Bernard 3 points, Boyd 9, Higgins 9, and AJ Green 18. Not much to say here, unfortunately. If you rolled the dice with Bernard like I did, I think he had the fumble on his first carry. I felt like they yanked him. Travion Williams from Texas A&M goes in there. Fumbled, gets yanked. So did Samaje Perine later in the game. So then they put Giovanni Bernard in. So I mean, it sucks. I rolled with them too.
I'm kind of at the point where I'm probably not playing any Bengals in the playoffs. You're going to have someone in this game. It was whack-a-mole AJ Green that gives you a good game. Otherwise, it's kind of low-end flex. I mean, if you're just looking to guarantee yourself, 7 to 10 points, I think Boyd and Higgins have still been able to maintain at least that kind of level of value in PPR. But for the playoffs, we lost all of our high-end when Burrow went out.
Yeah, it sucks. I mean, again, I think I said the only one I'd feel good about playing was Higgins because of him being a red zone threat. I mean, he still gets you 9 points, and chances are you're playing him as a flex or wide receiver 3. But, I mean, that's not – at this point, you might even be able to find somebody better just with the way some people have been stepping up. So, yeah, I'm with you. Unfortunately, I think it's time to just fade, especially because I think they'd get Baltimore in Week 16. So I'm definitely – I know – is it next week? I'm pretty sure they play Baltimore Week 16.
Yeah, here I'll look.
Maybe they played in 17. It may be 17 they played Baltimore.
To me, with Brandon Allen, it almost doesn't even really matter. They get the Steelers next week, and then they're at the Texans, which potentially, I mean, it's just a toss. But that's probably the game you feel the best about, and then it's the Ravens. So but I mean, the Cowboys came in with the worst defense in professional football and essentially rolled them. That would give me a moment of pause.
All right, Chiefs beat the Dolphins in what was a very entertaining game. This was one of the games I was actually paying attention to as much as I could in 33-27. Mahomes, 18 points in this one. CEH, 14. Tyreek Hill, 26. Travis Kelce, 27. The Chiefs win, and obviously with the Pittsburgh Steelers loss later in the night, give them the lead as the top seed in the AFC. Do you expect them to hold it over the next 3 weeks?
I do. I think that we've seen, Kelsey's on a tear. He's leading the entire NFL in receiving yards. Hill is on an incredible roll. CEH is what he is. Gave you a decent floor yesterday. I mean, Mahomes probably played his worst game of the year, and they still won on the road against a potentially playoff team in Miami.
Yeah, I would think so too. I don't think the biggest, I think, threat to them now is obviously going to be Pittsburgh, and they didn't look great against Buffalo either. I'm starting to wonder if maybe we're just starting to see chinks in their armor compared to, we kept thinking it was them kind of getting screwed by the schedule. Well, they've had a little bit of time now to kind of get back going. They're just not. It looks like Deontay Johnson's got the yips. He can't seem to hold on to a ball. I'm not mad at it, but
the Chiefs have at the Saints, which isn't the easiest game, but given what we've seen, and they're not expecting Breeze back, I think they have a good chance there. And then you're home for the Falcons, home for the Chargers. Those should be,
fairly easy wins.
Yeah, nothing's a lead pipe block, but that feels better. Pittsburgh's got Cincinnati, and then they've got Cleveland somewhere in there.
At the end, they play each other in Week 17.
If Cleveland can get a win tonight, which I think you and I both picked them, both think they will, they potentially are one game out. If you can keep tracking that way, that's a huge, huge matchup inside the division. I think that's where the pressure for Pittsburgh starts to turn.
Yep, yeah. I mean, that's what I was saying. I'm not going to complain about it because if Pittsburgh loses one, which they play another good team. I don't remember who it is because I was looking at the schedule and I was like, they play Cincy, which I don't think is going to be a loss. So they win that one.
The other thing I thought was interesting when I was listening to PTI, they said Pittsburgh had the lowest point differential of any 11-0 team in NFL history. So they're at Cincy, home for the Colts, at the Browns. So those last two, because Indy's in another position where they're in position to make the playoffs, but they gotta keep winning all these games. There's going to be kind of that tight, muddled pack, I think.
Well, I think the Colts do the same thing. I would say they mirror Pittsburgh very well in that they have really good defense, and that's what keeps them in the game. And they've got a couple explosive weapons. The one difference I would say is The Colts' offensive line is better than Pittsburgh's, and they've got a better running back right now than Pittsburgh. So if they can figure out a way to beat them, then yeah. Again, Cleveland would have to win out, and they have tough games, in my opinion, obviously tonight against Baltimore. Then they get the Giants, which even though they kind of looked really bad this week, and I still think are a decent team. Jets, I hate to say it, but I feel like it should be a win. The Browns should win that game. Yeah, it's another trap game, which, hey, the one thing I'll give Stefanski is they won that game against Jacksonville earlier this year, which I said was a trap game. It was close, but they ended up pulling out the win. If they pull that out, then they go into Pittsburgh. If Pittsburgh loses against Indianapolis, and it's a game for the division right there. And that would be massive, not just for the NFL, but for Browns fans. I think Pittsburgh as well. Because I kind of feel like Pittsburgh really has been the class of that division for a long time. We've seen Baltimore up there really good a couple years. Obviously, last year they were as well. They've been kind of up and down with Flacco, really good years, kind of mediocre years getting into the playoffs. So I think it'd be fun to see. On Miami's side here, Tua, 27 points. Lynn Bowden Jr., 15, and Mike Gesicki, 23 as well. I'm sorry, Mike Gesicki with 23. With the injuries to Bowden, he's come on. What is his future? Do you think he's a good buy in Dynasty?
I think he is an interesting buy in Dynasty. You can get him almost free now. I saw a lot of people kind of cutting him free. There was some intrigue in the offseason when he was drafted by the Raiders, and then he kind of got traded and seemed like he had no role and couldn't see the field in Miami, weren't sure what he was going to do. But now here later in the season, he's had a couple of sneaky good games. A lot of their top end players have been eradicated. They needed guys to step up. But I think it shows you there's some potential there. He's still got that kind of running back, wide receiver, could be one, could be the other kind of weapon X potential. And I think Miami needs some more offensive weapons, so I was encouraged. I wouldn't spend a lot, but if you see him on the wire, that's a guy this time of year, especially if you're not in the playoffs, start stashing prospects.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. My biggest fear with Bowden, obviously, it'll be interesting to see what he does down the stretch here with Miami. But with all the picks that they have from the trades that they've made before becoming good this year, I wouldn't be surprised if they go heavy in on wide receiver, and that will kind of kill a lot of his value for me. But I'm with you. He's a guy that you would probably, I would think, be able to buy for like a third round pick. I wouldn't mind doing. See, I don't know. I really actually think a third round should be.
I'm more looking like fourth round or getting them off the wire. That's more. This to me is more of a. You get to the middle of some of these seasons and you're really trying to compete, and no matter how you feel about some of these downline prospects, there comes a time where you have to release them, especially this with COVID and all the injuries, where people have set some of these guys free because they just don't have the space. This is the time of year where you start seeing those guys starting to get into games, and it's worth circling back and thinking about whether that's somebody you want to stash. I have him held in a couple of leagues. I was encouraged by that. I don't, it's not amazing by any stretch of the imagination. Parker went out. Preston Williams is on IR. They really didn't have much in the way of wide receivers. He got 7 for 82. I thought that was encouraging. Just the fact he's worked his way in there and gotten usage. It's the same way we felt a couple of weeks ago talking about Malcolm Perry. But Perry doesn't seem like he's been able to consistently get in there and stay healthy and have a role. I'm more interested that Bowden seems like he's kind of risen up. So that'll be it. Miami has a brutal last three. They are home for the Patriots, then at the Raiders, at the Bills, for a team that's trying to compete for the playoffs. So you're going to get a good sense of, I think a coach like Flores is looking at who's scrappy, who's fighting, who wants to be part of this winning culture and winning team.
Yeah. Let's see here. Oh, never mind. We already kind of talked about Miami there. So Cardinals beat the Giants here, 26-7. Murray, 18 points. Drake, 16. DeAndre Hopkins, 22. Dan Arnold, 10. I actually ranked Dan Arnold this week because I thought I might be able to do something. It's had a good couple weeks. Are we starting to believe in him as being a startable tight end?
Yeah, you and I have talked about a couple of weeks. I've said they need other targets to go to, and we thought, is Christian Kirk going to step up? Is Larry Fitzgerald going to step up? Is it Chase Edmonds? No, it's Arnold. It's Dan Arnold. Yeah. He's gotten touchdowns in the last couple of weeks. They look for him. He's gotten a few touchdowns. I was laughing a few weeks ago when I was watching the Arizona broadcast. I think it was on Monday night, and they were talking about Dan Arnold being a weapon that they like, this passing weapon. I'm like, are you kidding? A tight end in Arizona? But no, it seems like he is a guy they like, and they're getting him the ball, and they're having success there. And for that position, you could do a lot worse.
Yeah, it's I'm actually kind of with you. As much as I was making fun and not knowing he was even on the roster earlier in the year, he's been coming on. And I mean, we've seen Hopkins has been decent, not great. It's kind of something we talked about the past couple of weeks as well, in that he's been having a lot of really tough matchups. I mean, what did he have? 22 points. So he had a good game this week, which against Darby, which is actually kind of impressive. I think I only had him at like wide receiver 8 or 9 this week. So I didn't think he was going to have a massive game here, but they need someone to pop up, and he's been doing it, especially at a weakened tight end position. If you can get him and throw him in, he could end up possibly winning in your league.
The two that seem to be consistently stepping up of late is him and Drake.
Yeah.
So it's been kind of interesting, but it might be enough. I was impressed that they came out and not just won on the road, but looked that dominant.
Yeah, and they needed him, and they need him too, especially if they want to try to make the playoffs right now. They're one spot up on Minnesota and Chicago now with the win. So yeah, they've got to keep rolling. For the Giants here, it's a massive loss for them right now. Jones just 3 points, Wayne Gallman 10. They fall back, although still technically in it, but they are now a game or 2 games behind Washington.
So they're 1 game behind Washington, but they have the tiebreaker there. Philadelphia, which we'll get to, is now a half game behind them.
Yeah.
And actually looks like they may be getting their shit together. For the Giants, they looked awful yesterday against a offense and defense that had been struggling in Arizona at home. And now they get Cleveland and Baltimore in consecutive weeks. I think that's where it gives me a moment of pause about the Giants. They had a nice little run. They got a little frisky there. But it's I based on what we've seen, I find it tough to imagine them winning either of the next 2 weeks. And then what's your 5-9?
Yeah.
Or 5-10 at that point in time, because they're 5-8 now. That feels like they kind of slid away, because it does look like the winner in the East is going to be in the 6 to 8 win range.
Yeah, I mean, they have a massive – I think they actually play this week, them and the Browns need that one really bad as well. So that's going to be – I think if they lose that one, they're out. So that'll be a massive game for both sides there.
Well, it's just been interesting too, because, Washington has Seahawks, and then they have the Panthers, and then the Eagles, and they got beat up too. Whereas this time last week, it looked like both the Giants and Washington were surging. Giants lose and face a couple of tough games. Washington wins, but got beat up, and we don't know how. I think all of us are a lot less optimistic about a Washington playoff run with Dwayne Haskins.
Yeah. Well, I saw this morning they were saying that the X-rays came back negative, so hoping that it's not a bad thing. I mean, the one thing I'll say is if they can get Haskins to just not turn the ball over, that defense is good enough that if they could just, get him to just play small ball, to go use a baseball term, for a couple of games until they can get Alex Smith back. But yeah, it's I'm rooting for him, man. I said I wanted to see him get in, and they're figuring out a way to pull off wins right now, so I'm happy for him. Next up, Buccaneers beat the Vikings 26-14. Cousins 17 points, Cook 19, Thielen 6, Jefferson 9, and Irv Smith 16. Tough loss for Minnesota. Both of their tight ends outproduced their wide receivers combined. It was a very weird game here. Do you think that they have a chance to get back into the playoff race?
So they're home to Chicago next week, then at the Saints. To me, that's a pair of tough games. I know they beat Chicago earlier this season, but Chicago's not an easy out. And Minnesota just, to me, they lack consistency. We talked about it was impressive they come back to 6-6 and had kind of gotten back into that race. But a couple of really close games against teams they should have put away, probably a little easier. They fell back to earth. yesterday. I think with the offense they have, they're never out of it.
Yeah.
But Arizona feels like it has a little bit of an easier path, and now it's a game up again. And Chicago, like we talked about, same record as Minnesota, actually has the same to play for. So next week, I think whoever loses that game is probably knocked out.
Yeah. I think this next week, anybody that they lose is going to it's going to come down to, I would think, because how many teams are really still left in it? Is it just 3 now or 4?
So Tampa Bay's at 8-5. Arizona is at 7.
So Arizona has that last spot right now, right? And they're the game up on Minnesota and Chicago.
6. Minnesota and Chicago are 6 and 7. The 49ers now they're 5 and 8. I'd say they faded back too hard. The other teams that they talk about being in the hunt are all the NFC East. Technically Eagles not dead, as we'll talk about. Giants and Washington. They're really fighting for that 1 seed. So I think the final wild card is really a 3-team. Arizona, Minnesota, Chicago, which is why Chicago and Minnesota, both 6 and 7, play each other next week. Whoever loses drops to 6 and 8. I don't think 8 and 8 gets in as a wild card. I think you have to have at least 9 and 7.
That's what I was going to say. I wonder if maybe the last team that gets could be 8 and 8 because you've got Arizona's sitting at 7 and 6. If they lose 2, and I'm pretty sure they play San Francisco one more time. So I know it's crazy. Go ahead.
So Arizona, home to the Eagles, home for the 49ers, at the Rams. So actually, you're right. No incredibly easy games. Let's look at Chicago. Chicago actually
has an easier schedule.
At the Vikings. If they won that game, they get back to 7 and 7. Then at the Jaguars, home for the Packers.
So that Packers one could be huge. And the Packers might still be playing for that number 1 seed, so they likely are not sitting anybody.
You're right. Yeah, you could see Arizona losing 2 and getting to 8 if so. You could.
And if San Francisco wins that 1, I think the last spot. There's no way 2 8 and 8 teams get in, but that last spot really could come down. So I guess we can't say San Francisco's technically out of it, but I think they're the furthest one. It's going to come down to Arizona, and then, like you said, whoever wins that game between Minnesota and Chicago and Arizona is where that last race is going to come down to.
Tampa Bay, you're right, probably feels set because they're at the Falcons, at the Lions, home for the Falcons are their last 3, and they're 8-5 now. I don't really imagine them losing 2 of those. Well, I don't know if they lose 1 of those, but I certainly don't think they lose 2 of them.
2, yeah. Speaking of Tampa Bay, Brady 15 points, Ronald Jones 15, Mike Evans 8, Chris Godwin 4, Antonio Brown 9, Scotty Miller 11, and Gronk 7. Fournette was a healthy scratch. Is this good news for Rojo? And are you worried about starting these receivers in your fantasy playoffs? Is that for this week? I would assume not, because Evan Ingram. Well, no, they both already played. If you're talking about going forward, I'm probably going with Tanyan. Just seemed to have been he seems to be the second option behind Adams.
Giants offense has not been robust.
Yeah.
So I think it's great news for Rojo because they decided that they would rather have LaShawn McCoy and freaking Keyshawn Vaughn and Kenjon Barner active than Leonard Fournette. That feels like the Leonard Fournette is our third down beast experiment is over. You have to feel even better about Rojo taking that position, seeing that they've got Falcons, Lions, Falcons in the next 3 weeks. I think that's great. Wide receiver, I don't think you can stop playing those guys, especially with a licking your chops schedule down the stretch here. But boy, the thing, Tampa Bay actually surprisingly is no longer really out of it in their division because the Saints came back. They're 10-3, so they're 2 up, but they have the Chiefs this week, which I'm going to say I'm leaning toward the Chiefs right now. I haven't made my picks, but that feels like so you could be talking about a 1-game spread with 2 games left, and the Buccaneers have a very winnable schedule, so it'll be interesting to see. I'm sure they're both going to be stepping on it. I don't think you can not play those receivers, but as we saw yesterday, the one great deep ball pass ends up being Scotty Miller. We were talking about, should we play Brown? Is it going to be Godwin? Is it going to be Evans? It could be Scotty Miller. It could be freaking Tyler Johnson for all we know. Gronk catches the touchdown, does nothing else but catches the touchdown. Ronald Jones is out there running. They have an embarrassment of riches, and I don't know how many of them can put up massive points every week. So when you see Falcons, you're starting all those guys because they have potential, but somebody's going to get burned.
Yeah, as much as I hate to say this, I feel like Evans is the safest for me, just with the way he gets targeted by the end zone. And I don't like saying that because I don't think Evans is that good anymore. But I think for me, he's the safest out of all those. Outside of Rojo, I think Rojo is I mean, he's been set in your lineup for a while now. But the wide receiver-wise, I'm leaning Evans over everybody else. Titans beat the Jaguars 31-10. Tannehill 16 points. Derrick Henry 36 and A.J. Brown 24. Derrick Henry's amazing. We talked about this Friday. We thought they were going to lean heavily on him. I would say you two were right, though. In our talk Friday, you and Dennis were both talking about A.J. Brown being the guy. I thought it was going to be a Corey Davis game. Corey Davis does nothing. A.J. Brown has the big game here, but Tennessee's offense, just they look good. They're going to be a tough team to beat in the playoffs. And, of course, Derrick Henry seems to be on that November, December run again to win people their fantasy championships.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. Brown, Henry, Tannehill, probably Tannehill in 2 QB super flex, which is really predominant. Although to me, he's a borderline QB1 with what we've seen. Those guys are starts every week. Davis isn't a bad flex option. It seems like Jonnu Smith on the tight end position has sort of fallen off. I'm not taking a chance. Like we talked about, I'd almost rather roll, hey, Dan Arnold, come on down. He seems to be in a TD groove right now. So
on Jacksonville's side, Glennon was horrible and gets pulled. He had 2 points at that point. Minshew comes in. 13 points, James Robinson 12, Keelan Cole 19, Laviska Shenault 11. With Minshew back starting, how are you feeling about DJ Chark? Seems to be the forgotten man in Jacksonville.
Yeah, even forgotten by Minshew when he came off the bench. I think it's not super encouraging that Chark was the 4th or 5th best scoring receiver on their team.
He got targeted a bunch. He just same as before when Minshew went down. They couldn't connect.
I don't think there's a Jaguars receiver I feel comfortable playing right now with my playoff season on the line.
Yep, it's a Robinson for me. That's literally it. He's the only player I feel comfortable starting on that offense. I as someone who was probably – because I'm pretty sure I was higher on Chark than Dennis. Yeah. I know you were lower than both of us. I was very high on Chark coming into this year. I've benched him for a while now. He has not made my starting lineup. I was putting in Michael Pittman over him for a while, even before Pittman really had his blow up. Like, Chark, you can't play him. You cannot play him anymore.
Phillip Rivers, what the fuck, man? Throw the ball to Michael Pittman.
Yeah, well, we'll get to them in a minute. And trust me, I'm going to have a nice little thing to say about the Colts because I hate them with a passion.
We Broncos, love you, Tony. We can't take your team.
Yes, right, I love Tony, yes. And I'm glad that your Colts are doing good and making you happy, and they're going to make the playoffs, and I just hope that they don't play the Browns again, but it's great. I'm happy for you. Fuck the Colts. That's my opinion on them right now. The Broncos beat the Panthers 32-27. Lock 25 points. Melvin Gordon 12. KJ Hamler with 22. Tim Patrick 12. And the former Buckeye Nick Vannett with 12 points in this one as well. Huge day for Hamler. What are you expecting from him the rest of the season?
Yeah, see, this is, I think they're developing, he's getting healthy and they're developing a connection. This also long-term is why I told you I was a little more hesitant on Tim Patrick than you, because Cortland Sutton's coming back. And when Sutton's in there, Locke and Sutton have a big connection. Sutton has done well with every quarterback we've put in there, including Mr. I've crushed Cincinnati's hopes and dreams, Brandon Allen. And they invested a lot in Jerry Jeudy. Jeudy has so far seemed to have the least kind of connection with Locke. I don't know if Locke stays next year, if they make a change next year. I know a lot of people said he's for sure gone. I'm less for sure, because you see flashes like this. If they have a strong ending to the season, I could see them trying to wind it back with having people come back healthy, with actually getting the offensive line that they drew up. But that's what makes me a little bit nervous about these prospects, because now you're talking about 3 or 4 receivers there next year who emerges, who gets consistent targets, or is it a nightmare situation where you have a middling volume offense and 4 potential targets, 1 or 2 of whom are good every week?
Yeah. Yeah, I think.
I mean, because Hamler only caught 2 passes. It happened to be for 83 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
But that's not exactly the volume where, like, fire them up.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. I mean, obviously, we didn't get a chance to see Hamler last year. He's a rookie, or Judy, really. But we've seen, just from my opinion, and I know Locke only started 6 games last year?
5 at the end of the season. Yeah.
It just seems like they've always only been able to support with, again, Flacco, Brandon Allen. I'm not going to say much about them, but even when Locke was in, there was really just the one player. I mean, Fant had his games mixed in there as well, and I know he was sick. He hurt a lot of people, obviously, with that game as well.
That's going to be, honestly, something to watch, too, because I don't know if you heard, they pulled him and somebody else after the game started and have them isolated now pending a COVID test, didn't let them fly back with the team. And I was like, and then today, Brandon McManus, the kicker, just posted he was going to get placed into the COVID IR. Denver plays on Saturday. I was like, this is the reverse Des Bryant.
Yeah. Yeah, that is not good. It's going to be, I hope nothing happens, because I was looking at that today and I love my mother-in-law, but she was supposed to be coming in this weekend to spend time with us and the kids for Christmas. Doesn't look like she's going to be able to come in now. And I was looking at the schedule and being like, championship games, all day college football, 2 NFL games. Let's go, baby. I'm excited about this weekend. So I hope that they're able to play. But back to the point I was going to make was I'm going to be interested to see, first off, what they do with Locke. I just feel like every year, once we get to the point of Locke needs to go, all of a sudden he starts playing really good and starts making you wonder, maybe he can be the QB of this team. And I wonder what they're going to do with him, this offense, because I kind of feel like regardless of what they do with these guys moving forward, even Jerry Jeudy, who, again, I think I had he was my 3 coming out this year. I had CeeDee Lamb and Jalen Reagor over him coming into the draft. I kind of feel like when Sutton comes back healthy, even if it's Locke or if it's someone else, maybe that changes. But Locke, I kind of feel like it's going to be Sutton and Fant for me every week. And that's really it that I trust starting in my lineups.
Yeah, even Fant, we've seen be really uneven. Until they can more consistently develop volume, it's going to be hard. I think they said yesterday at the beginning of the broadcast, Denver's the lowest scoring team in the NFL, or second lowest scoring team in the NFL, was something that I heard, but also tried to ignore so that I could summon the will to watch the rest of the game, which actually turned out pretty good. But, I'll be curious. They have much bigger tests playing Buffalo this week. It's consistency and not turning the ball over. I know people on the outside are really ready to just say that the Locke's not the guy and they're moving on. And I have not. I've been disappointed with a lot of what I've seen this season, but I'm not sure organizationally they're ready to just pull it off. And if Denver ends up 7-9 or 8-8 again, you're talking about being in the middle of the round. Maybe they take one of those quarterbacks you're talking about in a second or a third round and have them compete. That's not out of the realm of possibility. It's been depressing since Manning left. Their offense has been almost unwatchable for 5 years, and every time they have some excellent skill players, but it's just not made a big enough difference. But I'm with you. It seems like every time we're about ready to say, well, it's over, they get hot, and I could see them finishing 7-9 or 8-8 and winding it up again.
Yep. On Carolina's side here, Teddy Bridgewater 20 points, Mike Davis 26, Robbie Anderson 17, and Curtis Samuel 16. Davis was solid again. I kind of feel like with the way he's been performing, Carolina out of it, we will not see CMC again in 2020. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think CMC really wanted to get back to play against Denver because that was the team. His father, Ed, was one of our big-time wide receivers, and he grew up kind of in that area. I know that they were talking about he wanted to be able to play in that game and wasn't well enough to do it. I don't know, with a couple of games left, whether you try to truck him out there and just pack in a chance for another injury, especially since he's had shoulder, he's had leg. Might be a lost season. Kind of the same thing we said about Mixon.
Yeah, I kind of feel like at this point, it's easy to say, I look at it, most things from a fantasy perspective, and obviously you have a ton of time in the offseason to get healthy, but at this point, he's struggled with injuries all year long. Like, I would think it'd be better just as much as I'm sure he just wants to do that. He's a fierce competitor. He wants to be out there playing, like you just mentioned, but at this point, it might be better for him to just be like, look, dude, not just was it a lost season for us, kind of feels like it was a lost season for you. Let's just sit it down, take it easy the rest of the year, come back next year. All right, my favorite team in the NFL, the Indianapolis Colts beat the Raiders 44-27. Jonathan Taylor, who is this kid? Where has this guy been? Is undrafted? Undrafted? Yeah. Have you heard of him? I didn't know who this kid was. I think so. They just picked him up off the trash heap. 30 points. Fucking bullshit, Frank Reich. My God, all year long. You know what? The one thing I will say about that, though? Guess where he sits right now in PPR formats?
12.
Running back 11, baby. So if he keeps it up, I'm going to end up getting my prediction right. So at least that makes me feel good. Said he was going to be a top 12 running back. Here he comes to hopefully finish out. If you were able to make the playoffs with him, they've got great matchups coming forward.
That 28-point lead that I have, my running backs that I started were Jonathan Taylor and Mike Davis.
There you go. Yeah, he's got some really good matchups. I know the Steelers one is the toughest, which I think we talked about earlier, is week 16.
Yeah,
so that's going to be a tough one. But next week, I can't remember who. They've got a really good matchup again. So
they've had good matchups. It's not the matchups. It's,
I know.
Will the coach actually give him the ball? And fortunately, the last few weeks, we've seen, a change of heart. Maybe Frank Reich got over Jonathan Taylor sleeping with his wife in the offseason and decided that he wanted to win games or something because
ridiculous.
It's finally happening.
I was looking more at it, and I think I finally realized what the biggest issue was. And it wasn't Hines. Like, I felt like we were always blaming Hines, right? It's like, why are they playing Nyheim Hines? And Nyheim Hines is a good player. Like, I like Nyheim Hines coming out. He's not Jonathan Taylor. He's still a good player. It was Jordan Wilkins. And they've stopped giving Wilkins carries, and they've started giving those carries they were given to Wilkins to Jonathan Taylor. And now we've seen him kind of coming on. So, I don't know. Maybe Wilkins slept with Reich's daughter, and now he's in the doghouse. So it's kind of like, I don't mean to make jokes, but it's so frustrating because Jonathan Taylor, we've seen, has all this talent. Why now they finally just started to give him the ball? I have no idea. But again, if you made it into the fantasy playoff, rejoice because he's going to be great.
Two Colts have come back from the dead because the other one that, of course, just looks like Andrew Luck's reincarnated is T.Y. Hilton, who, we were talking about, can he keep it up? 2 more touchdowns. I think he's back in a place where if you've got him, you pretty much are going to have to play him.
Yeah. Yeah. He's the guy. Well, we talked about it on Friday's show, and I think we all went Hilton over Pittman, and the fact that we thought Rivers can support one guy, and it just seems like him and Hilton are now getting that connection. It's going to be Hilton moving forward. It's
crushed all the value. Early in the season, it seemed like it was tight ends. Trey Burton seemed to be in a group. Their tight ends have been unusable now too. It's so weird. But I guess if we can lock on and know it's Jonathan Taylor, and then you just know it's going to be a receiver. Right now, it seems like it's T.Y. Hilton. Unfortunately, I like Michael Pittman. He had a couple of great flashes catch in 2021.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say about Hilton. I know a lot of leagues I saw redraft-wise, he was dropped in. So if you can pick him up, he may have already got picked up because of the performance he had the week prior. But
his ownership percentage.
I would try and get him because I think him and Taylor together right there, especially with, again, we mentioned earlier, Colts have to keep winning because the Titans are right there behind him. in that race for the division. So
actually, the Titans are the division winner right now. The Colts don't hold the tiebreaker. I looked at that. They're fighting for a wild card.
I thought the Titans
So-
were a game behind them, aren't they?
Nope,
They're
they're
both
tied.
9
They're
and 4?
tied record wise, and the Titans are the ones that are.
I thought for some reason I thought the Titans were 8-5 for some reason. I didn't
No,
realize
because
they were 9-4.
the Titans beat the Colts and knocked them back a game, and then last week when the Titans lost, they tied record wise, but Titans, I guess, have the tiebreaker because they've been listed.
Yeah.
So Hilton is 73% in Yahoo, only 59% in ESPN. My God, if he's on your waiver wire, go
Grab him
right now. Don't wait.
It's the division record. That's why Tennessee is 4-1 in the division. Indy is 2-2. So that's what the tiebreaker is. So yeah, but you are right on that. So,
but that probably means that Indy won't be able to catch them if they stay tied.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. They're playing for it though, because they can't slip up as well. They need to hope Tennessee slips up and they keep winning. Hines got 11 points and TY 25. We were just talking about how good he was. For the Raiders side here, Carr 23. Josh Jacobs, man, I don't know if you saw all that stuff with Josh Jacobs, but
no, whatever.
Okay, so we'll touch on that in a minute. I'm going to finish out this thing and then kind of go on my little diatribe. Again, I've never been a big fan of Jacobs anyway, so maybe I'm biased here. 10 points for Jacobs, Aguilar 21, Darren Waller 14. You were the one who kind of called this when we did our playoff show that the Raiders last year were in a really good spot and then just faded down the stretch. I think they are done. I think Miami is going to hold on. Same with Indy, and I think Baltimore has a better shot, who technically is sitting ahead of them, even though they're not in the playoffs. But are the Raiders done for the playoff race in 2020?
So they're home to the Chargers, home for the Dolphins, which probably ends up becoming a deal breaker game. But with the Ravens lurking around in there and the Colts and the Browns, that's no lock that one of those teams definitely gets in. But that's probably a deal breaker game. Then at the Broncos, I think they are going to miss, and I think they suspect they're going to miss. They fired their defensive coordinator today, which is never a sign of a team that's on the track to the playoffs. When you have 3 games left and you can your defensive coordinator, you have problems that you don't think are easily fixable.
Yeah. I unfortunately, I was kind of hoping they'd get in. I am with you. I think that they are likely out, which sucks. I mean, again, I'm not gonna lie though. I'd rather see Miami in. Miami just looks like a better team, so I hope Miami does make it in. But I'm with you. That game is going to be huge, and the reason I'm not even sure they get in with that is because Baltimore, I think, plays the Jets and the Bengals. I know are 2 of their remaining 3 games, so they have a much easier schedule moving forward as well. So with Josh Jacobs, again, I don't know how many people follow players on Instagram. I really don't, so I don't make it a big deal. But he posted on his Instagram 30 minutes before game time that he was not playing in the game. And he said, I'm going to piss off a lot of my fantasy owners, gave a little middle finger emoji, and said, I'm not playing in today's game. Then he obviously played in the game. So if you pulled him to, say, put in Devontae Booker because you thought Jacobs wasn't playing, you got screwed. Now, granted, Jacobs didn't have a massive day anyways, even if you did pull him out, but I hope fantasy karma comes around and bites him in the ass. I hate players like that, man. Like, I don't know.
People, I think on Sunday mornings, I only look at really the active-inactive report. Yeah. So that's kind of interesting, but I wonder why he would have said he wasn't playing unless he thought he was being funny.
Well, no. So he posted that, and it was like during like warm-up stuff and everything for the Raiders. So some people surmise that maybe some fans were jumping into his DMs, like we saw the Chris Carson thing that happened earlier this year. If that's the case, I will cut him some slack. We haven't seen or heard anything about that. He hasn't posted anything like Chris Carson did. I just think that's a shitty thing to do. I know that NFL players don't care about fantasy football. I wouldn't either, especially with the way I'm sure some people do talk and jump in players' DMs about stuff that they've done. Like, I'd be pissed about it too. But if we're all being honest here, fantasy is a massive part of the NFL industry. And why you just want to go in there and piss people off, I don't understand. But that was just all it kind of twisted. I guess it made it just unnecessary.
I'd be curious to see if it comes out too that he had, maybe he didn't look good in warmups, or the trainer said, I don't think you're ready to go. And and something like that feels a little weird.
Yeah. All right, so Seahawks get their practical bye week here, 42-3 against the Jets. Braxton Berrios, 7 points.
Yeah, Dennis was actually right. He was the highest
I know,
scoring.
right?
Congratulations, Dennis. I know.
If you played Ty Johnson, I'm sorry. I don't think any of us really advocated for him, though. So,
well, I like Ty Johnson if Gore was out. And once they declared Gore active, it's like, Frank Gore, Adam Gase must be find somebody who loves you as much as Adam Gase loves Frank Gore, because it hasn't mattered who they've had as running back. Bell couldn't get past Gore. LaMichael Pirine couldn't get past Gore. He's a Hall of Famer, I guess.
I mean, I do think he's a Hall of Famer, but just wow.
No, he is a Hall of Famer, but it just Ty Johnson looked incredible last week when he came in, and the fact that you're like, nah, I don't want to try it.
Yeah. On Seattle's side here, Wilson 22 points, Carson 18, Metcalf 18, and Lockett 10. 4 passing touchdowns, and poor old Tyler Lockett couldn't get one of them.
Russell, the Christmas card is no longer coming.
I didn't have Tyler Lockett anywhere, so it didn't matter to me. I don't have any Seattle players really. I have Chris Carson, I think, on one team.
Gets a touchdown, Tyler Lockett. No.
Yeah. Yeah. It was good to see Russell bounce back, though. We kind of been worried about him here for the past couple of weeks. Not playing that great. It's good to see, got that get-right game in the Jets defense, and he had that bounce back. It was nice to see.
Yeah, it's going to be – they play Washington next week, so it'll be interesting to see.
It's going to be a tough one with the way that defense has been playing. Packers beat the Lions 31-24. Rodgers, 30 points. Aaron Jones cost a lot of people their playoffs this week. 9 points. Devontae Adams, 24. MVS, 20. And Robert Tonyan, 14. Is Green Bay the best team in the NFC?
I think so. I like, how much I love the Saints. Taysom Hill, had a stumble yesterday. Drew Brees hasn't been incredible throughout the season. I don't know about you, but I have some genuine concern, even though they're holding them out for a while because they seem in good playoff position. You don't break 11 ribs and puncture a lung at 41 and just have it not affect you. So Green Bay, I feel like as long as Rodgers and Adams stay healthy, they can hang with anyone.
Yeah, I mean, again, Rodgers I would say it's fair to say Rodgers is the biggest miss of the fantasy football industry this year. I feel like we all kind of wrote him off for dead after the year he had.
Their organization kept telling us was, we're not going to throw. We're not going to let Aaron throw. We're not going to get him anyone to throw to. Screw you. We want to run 1930s football. And that was like, just kidding. JK.
Well,
Josh,
they are still
giving you the middle finger.
Yeah, they are still running it a lot, but they've moved more toward like that dual backfield with Jamal. And again, Jamal's looked better too, so you can't even fault him for that.
And the difference too, I think, is Tonyan has developed. He's probably even better than Jimmy Graham was when Graham was kind of going in that offense, and Adams has stayed healthy. Kind of makes you wonder what would their passing offense have been like last year if Adams missed significant portions of the season last year and struggled. He has not had that issue this year, and he's by far and away the number one wide receiver right now.
Well, that's what I've argued the past couple of years is Adams, to me, if he stays healthy, is the number one wide receiver. I'd take him over Hopkins because he just does more than Hopkins does. I love Hopkins, and that's the biggest thing I think you have in Hopkins' favor. Hopkins, I don't think has ever even missed a game. I think you could argue he's probably like Joe Thomas and never missed a play because that dude, even when he gets hit, comes back in.
I will say, though, I think Green Bay is the best team right now, but the NFC to me feels pretty wide open. I think you could make a case for 4 or 5 teams in the NFC, even the Rams. The Rams may not impress us the way that the 2018 Rams did on the way to their Super Bowl, but they're arguably a better team. Seattle has moments where they look like an incredible team. The Saints are still the Saints. And Tampa Bay, I don't think you can rule Tampa Bay out once you get into those sudden death elimination games. They have talent on defense. They have talent, and they have probably the most veteran playoff experience throughout some of the core of their players. Because you had Antonio Brown, a guy to think about. He has a lot of veteran playoff experience. He may be a wild card, but he brings some of that to the table.
Yep. Yeah, I might surprise people when I say this, but if I had to rank the best teams in the NFC right now, I think it'd be Green Bay Rams. If I'm being honest, that both those my biggest fear with Green Bay is that rush defense. That's it, though. I mean, they've got a really good defense, and the thing is, with Rodgers playing the way that he is, if Aaron Jones, Devontae Adams, and Bobby Tonyan, of all people, can stay healthy, they can score with anybody.
So,
and I trust Rodgers more than any other quarterback in the NFC right now.
Let me ask you something. I thought it was very interesting. I don't know if you saw the Packers won the NFC North yesterday, which I don't think is a surprise. But Rodgers, when they were talking to him, was very kind of introspective, talking about savoring it and trying to savor the journey. Those are not really, not taking it for granted. Those were not really things that we've heard from him in the past. We know they took Jordan Love.
Yeah.
Does Aaron? It just, to me, there was a very moment of pause. Is Aaron Rodgers thinking, if I win, do I just leave on top while I'm still it?
I don't think so, but it's hard to say no because he's come out and said stuff like that he'd rather leave being on top than going past. Yeah.
He's only a year younger than Elway was,
My biggest thing with Rodgers is it may have been last year, the year before, where he said he wants to play into his 40s. And I think we've seen a different Rodgers, though. I've brought it up a bunch of times. Rodgers in the past would have destroyed MVS with the fumble that he had in overtime and everything. And it happens. People fumble the ball. We'll move on. We'll get to next week. That's not the Rodgers we've seen. And I'm wondering if maybe that is a little bit of, I don't know how to put it it just seemed like maybe the Rodgers we saw the past few years was the way he was because him and Mike McCarthy were just not getting along, as we've clearly now found out. And maybe it was just a little bit of him being frustrated and tired of being with Mike McCarthy. So you kind of get those talks about, hey, I might not be around much longer and all that stuff. But then now that everything seems to be going the way that it's going with LaFleur, we're starting to see this more relaxed kind of enjoying the moment, because he's even talked about that throughout the year, just enjoying playing football again. And that's what I kind of like seeing out of him. I don't know. I hope not, because I know Brady's the GOAT. Rodgers, in my opinion, is the best quarterback I've seen in my lifetime. Everybody wants to talk about what Patrick Mahomes is doing. Rodgers was Mahomes before Mahomes was Mahomes. Rodgers was doing the things Mahomes does now before anybody else. So for me, even though Brady has the championships, Rodgers is my GOAT. He's the best I've seen play. Now, Patrick's probably going to pass him at some point because of how damn good that kid is. But for me, Rodgers is the best that I've seen play. So I hope he's not anywhere close to hanging it up. But we'll see. I mean, if they go?
Packers Chiefs Super Bowl,
so
which would be a pretty exciting.
I mean, if they go and they say they go to the Super Bowl and they knock off the Chiefs and he decides to walk away, it wouldn't surprise me. I'd hate it for my Adams shares. God, would I cry. I would legitimately cry. But
so would Adams. He would legitimately be spending the spring.
Austin Hooper isn't active. That is not good, because there was a lot of talk that he was actually going to play. So that just came across the wire. For Detroit here, Stafford 14, Swift 15, Hawkinson 16. We were kind of worried about what was going to happen with Swift. Comes out there, does actually pretty good, get you the touchdown. How are you feeling about him moving forward these next couple weeks?
I feel okay. I mean, he didn't get an incredible workload, but we wondered if they were going to ease him back in. It did look like they eased him back in, but he still managed to get the touchdown. they need explosive players. Doesn't look like, speaking of lost season, doesn't look like Kenny Golladay is coming back. Kenny Golladay is not giving them anything. They seem to, TJ Hawkinson has quietly developed into a really, kind of stud tight end weapon there. And Swift is what they've got. And I think they're looking at the future. I think if you got him, you got to play him. I feel like what we saw this week is kind of around a floor range for him, probably 10 to 15 points as a floor, and that ceiling could be what we saw from Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, I'm all in on Swift now. I do think some of it was them just working him back in. Concussion, had the illness. They probably didn't want to just throw him out of them. Here you go, kid. Here's 20 carries and 10 catches. So I think moving forward,
Green Bay team kill you.
Yeah. So I think he'll be fine moving forward. He's a guy again. Same thing with Jonathan Taylor. If you were able to make it into the playoffs with both those guys, good luck to you because they're going to be phenomenal. They're probably going to help you win the league. And Hawkinson has been hot. I'll be really interested to see. I've got a nice little series I have not told you guys about that I'm planning for the offseason. I'm going to be interested to see where we go with TJ Hawkinson because he's, in my opinion, moving himself very close to that top 3 territory.
I have him and Andrews in that work league I talked about, and I elected to put Andrews in the lineup. And after I watched Hawkinson put up those scores, I mean, I could be sitting there done with like a 52-point lead. So I'm thinking to myself, maybe a mistake.
I think Andrews will be all right tonight. I don't think he's getting 16, though. I don't think he's getting 16. I think he's going to score tonight, though. Eagles beat the Saints 24-21. Taysom Hill 18, Kamara 22, Thomas 16, and Sanders 13. First kind of stumble here for Hill as a starter. Do you think he can bounce back versus the Chiefs? I mean, it's really just him because the rest of the team was phenomenal. Well, defense wasn't. Offense was not phenomenal.
Their defense let them down a little bit, but offensively, they seemed to get it going in the second half. Struggled a lot in the first half. I thought he made some better throws. His long touchdown to Sanders was a pretty decent deep ball. He's getting Thomas involved. I think he's getting more confidence. It's going to be a tough game with the Chiefs, but a lot of teams, get into kind of track meet scoring. I've been encouraged. We wondered about Kamara. This is 2 games in a row where you're seeing him get involved as a pass receiver. And Hill has kind of restrained himself a little bit running wise. I wonder a little bit, though, if he's so focused on not running that it's taking him out of his game a little bit and maybe needs to be not quite as cautious about taking off. But there's going to be bumps and growing pains. It's his first really extended time as a starting quarterback. He's been a gadget player. I think he's done pretty remarkably well. Chiefs will be a big test and a big test for the Saints because they went from being in a great position to get that 1 seed to now they are, by tiebreaker, they're behind Green Bay. And if they lose that Chiefs game, you could end up slipping further back and you have to worry about who's creeping up behind you in like the Rams and the Seahawks who aren't really that far out of it.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting test for them. I think the one thing that's going to help them is we've seen this past week and a couple other times, good defenses can kind of hold KC in check a little bit. And I do think if New Orleans can play like they did in the second half, like they've been really playing the past couple weeks, they can keep this game close. And then we'll need to see what Taysom Hill can do. It doesn't look like Breeze is going to be back. So it looks like it's going to be the Hill show, at least probably until the playoffs.
They came out and said they weren't going to rush Breeze back, and they shouldn't. Dude's 41, 11 broken ribs, punctured lung.
Yeah,
where they really need him is the playoffs. If I'm Drew Brees, I want to get in at least in week 17, so that my first game back after extended missing time is not a playoff game.
Yeah,
because
I agree.
They have not had the most wonderful luck in their first playoff games of the season. So. If I'm Breeze, I'm like, I would like a training wheels game.
Yeah. On Philly's side here, Hurts was really good, 19 points, and Sanders has the massive game, 29. Hurts looks solid in this one. They've already come out and said he's starting again next week. What are you expecting from the Eagles moving forward?
I feel like this is Doug Peterson's nightmare because they came out before that game yesterday and said Carson Wentz is not going anywhere. He's still part of their long-term plan. But this team looked better in the second half against Green Bay, which is probably the best team in the NFC right now, and went and won against New Orleans, which is the second best team in the NFC right now, with Jalen Hurts. I think you for sure keep rolling with him. I figured they were going to start him the rest of the season, get an extended sample size to see anyway, but nothing that they saw yesterday would have dissuaded him. The Eagles still have a tough schedule because I think we were looking, they're playing let me pull it up. They were going to play a potential playoff team again this week. So he's got at the Cardinals and then at the Cowboys versus Washington. The thing is, with the injuries to Alex Smith and the way the Giants have kind of imploded again, the Eagles are not actually out of it. Were they to win the last 3 games, which all 3 of those I think we would say is winnable. Cardinals haven't looked unbeatable. Cowboys are the Cowboys, and Washington, they could potentially get into the playoffs. So if Jalen Hurts comes in and goes 4-0 and gets you to the playoffs,
I said it last week, and I know what Doug Peterson said. I think he's just being nice. You don't want to come out and be like, yeah, we're getting rid of Carson Wentz. I wouldn't be if Hurts wins out and takes him to the playoffs, I think Carson Wentz is gone. I'm not saying it's the right decision, not saying I agree with it. I think that they trade him. And as we saw, because we kind of talked about this last Thursday and how possible would it be with his contract and everything? It turns out it's a lot easier than both of us thought it was going to be with what Albert Breer and all those people were tweeting out. So I think there's a realistic shot Carson Wentz is gone at the end of this year. Now, if Hurts goes out there and falls on his face the next 3 games, probably not. The bad thing is I don't think that's going to happen. He looked good yesterday, against a team that I did not think.
The toughest game.
Yeah. I did not. We talked about it. Like, none of us thought he was going to be that good against that good of a defense. Now, he didn't look quite as good in the second half, and we'll see. The biggest thing we've always talked about is once these teams start getting tape on you, can they start figuring you out? We've not seen anything of Jalen Hurts at the NFL level. We got college tape on him. Completely different when you come to the NFL, but he played really good. I almost would debate starting him in leagues because of what he can do with his legs. It reminds me very much of what Carson Wentz did earlier in his career. And then he has suffered all those injuries. We don't see him run as much. Hurts was going through his progressions. If nothing was there, he was taking off and he was getting you those yards. He wasn't just sitting back in the pocket trying to make something happen. Chargers beat the Falcons here 22-17. Matt Ryan, 7 points. Calvin Ridley, 26. Russell Gage, 18. Is Matt Ryan with the Falcons next season?
By the way, he's played and the fact that they need, I would lean toward no, but I just pulled up
his contract.
The dead cap is $49.9 million next year. So I think the smartest thing for Atlanta might be to draft somebody later in the draft and start moving toward it, because I know they have offensive line problems and Julio has had trouble staying healthy. Hayden Hurst hasn't really panned out. Todd Gurley, not the answer. So they have a lot of issues, and their defense sucks. He imploded yesterday. It was him consistently throwing the ball away to a Chargers defense that had seemed to master giving up games. That was what cost him that game. I think that's got to be concerning. He's not getting any younger. And they just feel stale. Maybe getting a different coach will help. I think Raheem Morris, who had developed some energy toward possibly getting that job for the long term, this recent stretch for Atlanta, plus them getting Tampa Bay twice, I don't think that's going to go that well. Kind of might end that hopes and dreams. But I guess we'll have to see. Matt, they don't look great, and for fantasy, I've had Matt Ryan on a couple of rosters. I played him, in the playoffs. You wanted to believe he'd been pretty steady for fantasy. That's even been a real kind of disappointment too. So Atlanta's a rough out. I think Ridley's probably the only one I'm feeling good about right now. It's not clear if Julio's getting out there. It just looks bad.
Yeah, if Julio doesn't come back, I might trust playing Gage. He does seem to play good with Julio, and I would honestly wonder. I think Julio's going to be done for the year if I had to guess. On the Chargers side here, Herbert 15, Eckler 23, and Keenan Allen 20. Chargers get back on track. They seem like a solid team. What do you think of them moving forward? I mean, they're out of the playoff race this year, but maybe I guess the question I think would be for me, because we talked about this last week. If say they win out, is that enough for Anthony Lynn to save his job? Because I kind of feel like a lot of their issues are being blamed on him.
I don't know about him saving his job, just because I feel like they've blown a lot of games because of bad decisions that they could have a much better record that they played better than that. For fantasy purposes, their next two games are Raiders and Broncos. So I think you're probably feeling pretty good if you got those pieces in the fantasy playoffs after a stumble the week before. But to me, that Patriots game where they got laid out 45-0, that probably was the end for me with Anthony Lynn. And they have Raiders, Broncos, Chiefs to end. They're 4-9 team, I believe, right now. So, 5-11 is probably an optimistic, maybe 6-10.
Yeah.
Does that get you back? I don't know what the expectations really were in that organization. We talked about them starting a season with Taylor. They seemed to be talking about that they were a playoff contender, and then they moved quickly to Herbert after the lung puncture heard around the world.
Yeah.
Herbert, I think, has played much better than any of us thought was the potential upside for Taylor. And they still haven't done a lot. They've had injuries. They seem to chronically have injuries. But it's the really bad situational football. Those are head coaching things. And to me, I don't – if they keep him, it's because they like him and because they like the culture he's building, not because of what he's done coaching this team.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've said that before. Like, it sucked because I picked the Chargers in multiple games to win in our pigskin pick'em because of Herbert and the way that team was playing. And as I talked about earlier, there was one point where they were winning. They lost 5 games in a row being up 16 points in the fourth quarter. You cannot lose games like that in the NFL. So, you cannot take a 16-point lead into the fourth quarter and blow it.
Maybe Anthony Lynn is a little bit Freddie Kitchens-like in that players like him, and he's been able to elicit some nice stats, although that might have to do, I think Wisenhunt's their offensive coordinator. That might have more to do with him than Anthony Lynn. The game management is such a crucial thing. It's the difference between being a contender and being an afterthought.
Yep. Washington beats the 49ers 23-15. J.D. McKissick 10 and Logan Thomas 10. Gibson out. Smith gets hurt. What do you think Washington can do with Haskins and McKissick for at least 1 week? I'm pretty sure Alex Smith will not be back this week.
Yeah, and so they're playing Seattle. I think that's a nightmare. Because I know Seattle's defense has been somewhat vulnerable, but Pete Carroll and Jamal Adams are going to find a way, and Ken Norton Jr. are going to find a way to get to Dwayne Haskins, especially, had Haskins gotten to play this whole season and maybe got game reps and got better and learned better situational football, you might feel better about that. But the guy's been on the bench for the better part of 10 or 11 weeks, and now to throw him out there against a loaded for bear playoff team is going to be rough. And you're missing – Gibson was a real offensive spark plug. I was sort of disappointed that even after Haskins got into the game yesterday, he couldn't seem to connect with McLaren. Their passing game is not really dynamic enough to rely on Logan Thomas alone.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a bummer for all of us to have these pieces for the fantasy playoffs too. I actually had – Sophie's Choice benched McLaren for Mike Evans yesterday, and it's not like Mike Evans was a world beater, but it just doesn't look good. And Washington, unfortunately, with the fact that they lost both those games to the Giants, they have to stay ahead of the Giants. And now you got the Eagles coming in the rearview mirror. That NFC East feels pretty wide open to me again.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting run down the stretch here for them. On San Francisco's side here, just Ayuk, and he 21 points. Aside from him, I picked him as my rookie of the year earlier. Love the kid. I think he's the one moving forward, even when Kittle comes back. There ain't no one else on this team I want to play.
No, didn't Samuel get hurt again yesterday too?
Yes, he did. Yep.
So.
Yeah.
And they seem to love Kyle Juszczyk, Jeff Wilson, Tevin Coleman, and Raheem Mostert equally. So that's working out really well.
Yeah. Last game of Sunday, the Sunday night game between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Buffalo Bills. The Bills win 26-15. Big Ben, 13 points. Juju, 17. Deontay Johnson, 8. Tough game for Johnson here. Looked like he had a little bit of, he's looked like he's had a little bit of the yips the past couple weeks, dropping balls. Got benched.
Yeah.
He did get benched. He did get benched. For the, what was it, right early in the second quarter, all the way till almost the end of the third when they were behind, looked like they started to run a bunch of 4 wide receiver sets, and that's when they decided to bring Deontay back out there. I am not worried about him moving forward for that. It's one of those things where it's just mental. It's in his head right now. You can see it, and I believe that he can get it fixed. Might have cost you your game this week, which it sucks, but I think moving forward, I'm still putting him in my lineup.
And also prayers for Cincinnati, who gets this Pittsburgh team next week.
Yeah, all pissed off. Yeah, not going to be fun. For Buffalo's side here, Allen, 18 points, and Stephon Diggs, 29. Diggs might be the other guy we all kind of missed on this year, although I did say it was going to be a great landing spot for him.
I mean, I think we all thought he'd be wide receiver 2.
Yeah, we all had him as wide receiver 2.
To a high wide receiver 1, which,
yeah,
but I don't So I'm just going to say I didn't foresee Buffalo fundamentally changing its offensive scheme to be almost their pass first, pass second, pass third right now.
Well, I think that speaks more to maybe Singletary's not as good as we hoped he was going to be in the offseason with what we saw in the flashes of him last year. Yeah.
I mean, like I said, that drafting Moss.
We didn't think like Diggs was going to be horrible. I did think it was going to be a great landing spot for him. And what's insane for me, I think, is looking at it. He's putting up wide receiver 1 numbers without the touchdowns, which is usually what makes you a wide receiver 1. He scored the one he's got last night made his 5th touchdown on the year. Like, he has not been scoring touchdowns. It's just been the catches in the yards. So if you were able to get Diggs, who I know some people are drafting as like their late second, early third wide receiver in some redrafts or everything, you're loving life right now. But with a big win there's a lot of people talking about Buffalo being the only team that can stop Kansas City. Is Buffalo a Super Bowl contender for you?
I think they are. Arguably, I would feel more comfortable with them than I do about Pittsburgh with where they are right now. 3 or 4 weeks ago, I wouldn't have said that. I think Kansas City, to me, is a little bit of a different level right now. For the AFC, I feel like but then you have that group of Tennessee, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, even the Colts, who've all looked pretty good, who've won some battle-tested games. I thought last night was huge for Buffalo. They've had a good record. They've had a good season. I think people still weren't taking them that seriously. That was a very important statement signature win. If they can follow that up, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility they could sneak up and get the 2 seed. So I think it's good. And we've seen the playoffs are always wide open. No one was all on Tennessee when the playoffs started last year. You get a team that's hot at the right time that has the right pieces, and Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, I feel like they found a very reliable and determined connection. I think Allen has put himself right back there in that MVP discussion again. And honestly, he with what they've quietly done, and especially if they can climb up there and get that 2 seed, I think he has a real chance to get that.
I agree. I was actually going to say as my closing statement on this game, I think he just moved to the MVP front runner. I mean, I feel bad saying that because I kind of feel like we're all overlooking what Mahomes is doing again this year. But I mean, nobody expected this out of Josh Allen. And maybe it's a little bit of the Michael Jordan effect with Mahomes. We've already seen it with Mahomes. We kind of need you to impress us or wow us again. And he's still doing Mahomes type things. But I think for me right now, if I had to pick one, I'm going Josh Allen. All right, so that will do it for us today. Obviously, we've got the Browns and the Ravens starting here in a little over an hour. Should hopefully be a really good game tonight. Hopefully, you guys can get the points you guys need if you're still hanging in the balance for tonight's game to get you into Week 15 and closer to that elusive fantasy championship. Me and Matt will be back tomorrow to recap this game, any other news and notes, and possible waiver wire targets as well. Good luck to everybody who are finishing out games tonight, and we will be back again